Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Sometimes we think we have everything figured out, only to discover that our understanding was just the beginning of a much deeper journey. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another story about faith or marriage or finding your way back to God. It's about what happens when everything you believed gets turned upside down and you discover that the truth is more beautiful and complex than you ever imagined. This is Sarah's story, but it could be yours too. Or maybe it's the story of someone you love who's been carrying burdens they were never meant to carry. Either way, I invite you to listen with an open heart, because what happened to Sarah changed not just her life, but her understanding of what it truly means to be loved by God. I never thought of myself as someone who would go against what people expected. I was always the good girl, the one who followed the rules and tried to do what was right. From the time I was little, I learned that being obedient was important, that God loved people who followed his ways, and that questioning certain things meant you didn't have enough faith. My name is Sarah Mitchell, I'm 48 years old, and I run my own business now. But for most of my life, I was known as the woman who went to church every Sunday, who sang in the choir, and who believed that marriage was forever, no matter what happened. When I was 22, I got married to David. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. He came from a good family, he was respected at church, and I thought I was doing exactly what God wanted me to do. In the beginning, everything felt right. We held hands during prayer, we talked about our future, and I believed we would grow old together. But slowly things changed. The sweet words stopped coming, the little acts of kindness disappeared, and after a while, even basic respect seemed to fade away. I kept thinking it was just a rough patch, that if I prayed harder and tried to be a better wife, things would get better. Then I found out about the first affair. I felt like my world had collapsed. I had never experienced pain like that before. I cried until I had no tears left, and I prayed every night for God to fix our marriage. People at church told me to forgive him, that God hated divorce, and that if I was truly faithful, I would fight to save my marriage. So I did. I stayed quiet about the pain. I smiled when people asked how we were doing. I kept believing that somehow, if I just held on long enough, everything would work out. But it happened again and again. Each time, a little piece of my heart died. I started to wonder if God really wanted me to stay in a marriage that was breaking me apart bit by bit. Was I supposed to keep pretending everything was fine just to avoid the shame of divorce? For years I stayed. I carried the weight of a marriage that existed only on paper. My faith started to feel empty. When I prayed, I felt like no one was listening. When I sang hymns, the words felt meaningless. I looked at other couples at church and wondered if I would ever feel truly happy again. Then one day, everything fell apart completely. This time, everyone found out. The whispers in the church hallways became impossible to ignore. Women who had been my friends started looking at me with pity, and some seemed to blame me for not being able to keep my husband faithful. That's when something inside me finally broke. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had been afraid to think. If I stay in this marriage, am I really following God, or am I just destroying myself? The answer didn't come right away. For months I felt empty and confused, but eventually I made the hardest decision of my life. I asked for a divorce. The reaction was swift and harsh. Some of the same people who had pitied me now looked at me with disapproval. I was quietly removed from church activities. It didn't matter what David had done to our marriage. In many people's eyes, I was the one who had given up. Starting over wasn't easy. I stopped going to church as much, not because I stopped believing in God, but because I felt like I no longer belonged there. I felt like a stranger in my own faith community. After a few years of being alone, I met Robert. He was kind and gentle, and he treated me with respect. He looked at me like I was valuable, something I had almost forgotten how to feel. I tried to fight my feelings for him, but eventually I had to admit that I was in love. When Robert asked me to marry him, my heart wanted to say yes immediately, but my mind was filled with fear. I spent sleepless nights reading the Bible, talking to different pastors, and trying to figure out what was right. Some people told me that marrying again would be adultery. Others said that God understood my situation and would bless a new beginning. But there was one question that haunted me more than any other. If I married Robert, would I still go to heaven when I died? I didn't know the answer, and it was with this terrible uncertainty that I decided to move forward with my life. Robert and I got married in a small ceremony. It wasn't as fancy as my first wedding, but it was filled with a love I had never experienced before. For the first time in years, I felt complete and truly happy. But no matter how hard I tried to push the thoughts away, the doubt was always there, whispering to me every night. What if God saw my new marriage as a sin? What if this choice would separate me from Him forever? It was while I was struggling with these thoughts that something happened that changed everything. One night I woke up feeling like something heavy was pressing down on my chest. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I tried to call out to Robert, but no sound came from my mouth. I wanted to sit up, but my body wouldn't move. The room seemed to get darker, and everything started to blur. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. The pain stopped and the fear went away. But when I looked down, I saw something that shocked me completely. I was still there in the bed, but I was also standing beside it, looking at my own body. I tried to touch my arm, but my hand went right through it, like I was made of air. That's when I realized what had happened. I had died. I don't know how long I stood there, trying to understand what was happening. It felt like a dream, but I knew it wasn't. Everything looked more vivid than real life, but also somehow distant. Then I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I felt a presence that was stronger than anything I had ever experienced. The room around me started to fade away, and I found myself being pulled towards something dark and deep, like an endless tunnel. I tried to resist, but I couldn't stop moving forward. As I got closer to the darkness, I heard sounds that made my blood run cold. They were screams, cries of pain and despair coming from everywhere at once. I was terrified. But then, just when I thought I was going to be swallowed up by the darkness, everything changed. A warm feeling filled me, not just around me but inside me, like something I didn't even know existed was being lit up for the first time. The screaming stopped. The darkness began to pull back, and then I saw it, a point of light in the distance. At first it was small, but it grew bigger and brighter, until it was so intense I could barely look at it. And then I was standing before Him. I didn't need anyone to tell me who He was. I just knew it was Jesus. I fell to my knees without even thinking about it. There was no fear now, just an overwhelming sense of being in the presence of something greater than anything I could imagine. Are you still afraid? His voice wasn't loud or commanding, but it was the most powerful voice I had ever heard. It seemed to speak directly to my soul. I couldn't find words to answer. Then the light around me expanded, and suddenly I could see heaven. It wasn't like the pictures in children's books. It was alive, pulsing with light and harmony. There were beings there that I can't even describe, made of light and wind and something beyond human understanding. This is what waits for those who follow me, Jesus said. But even in the middle of all that beauty, I felt a knot in my stomach. What if I didn't belong there? What if my decision to remarry had cost me my place in heaven? As if He could read my thoughts, Jesus looked at me with eyes full of mercy. Are you still afraid of what will happen to you? Do you want to know if you made the right choice? That was exactly what I needed to know. I had spent years wondering if I had done the right thing by getting divorced and remarrying. Jesus raised His hand, and suddenly I could see scenes from my life playing out before me like a movie. I saw my first wedding day, full of hope and joy. I saw myself alone and crying while David spoke to another woman on the phone. I saw myself on my knees praying desperately for God to show me what to do. I saw myself signing the divorce papers with shaking hands. And finally I saw Robert and me on our wedding day, genuinely happy and in love. Then Jesus spoke words that changed everything for me. Do you think I take joy in your suffering? Do you believe marriage was meant to be a burden that you carry, no matter how much it hurts you? I was stunned. Then He showed me more images, this time from the Bible. I saw Moses allowing people to divorce when their marriages became unbearable. I saw Jesus explaining to the religious leaders that divorce was allowed because people's hearts could become hardened. I saw Paul writing that if someone leaves a marriage, the person who remains shouldn't be bound to it. I never wanted you to suffer, Jesus said. I never intended for you to be trapped in something that was no longer alive. Do you want to know about your second marriage? I held my breath, waiting for His answer. I look at the heart, He said. How many couples stay married for decades but have never truly been united before me? How many stay together just because it's convenient, without love, without respect, without honesty? The sin isn't in a new marriage. The sin is in lying, in selfishness, in betrayal, in using my name to create prisons I never intended. Those words hit me like lightning. My marriage to Robert wasn't a mistake. My love wasn't a sin. God had always seen my heart, and He knew that my choices came from a desire to build a life based on genuine love and respect. But then, before I could fully take in what he had told me, Jesus said something that filled me with panic. "And now you need to go back." I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay there with him, to ask more questions, to understand everything I had gotten wrong. But I felt myself being pulled backward, away from the light and warmth. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, my chest burning as life rushed back into my body. I could hear voices around me, people calling my name. When I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Robert's face, streaked with tears. "You're here," he whispered, holding my hand like he never wanted to let go. I was back, but everything had changed. I was no longer the same person who had been carrying doubt and fear for so many years. I had seen the truth, and I had heard it directly from Jesus. In the days that followed, I struggled with how to explain what had happened to me. How could I tell people that I had died and come back? How could I convince them that Jesus had shown me something different from what I had been taught? But I knew I had to try. The experience wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who had been carrying the same burdens I had. Everyone who had been told they were beyond God's grace because of choices they made in moments of pain. I started by telling Robert, then my family, then some close friends. Not everyone believed me. Some thought I had been hallucinating, or that I had been deceived. But I knew what I had experienced was real, because I could feel God's presence in my life, in a way I never had before. I began to study the Bible with new eyes, looking for answers directly from God instead of just accepting what others told me. I started living my faith based on truth instead of fear. And now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: God doesn't see us the way people do. People look at outward appearances, but God looks at the heart. For years I lived in fear of being condemned. But in that moment with Jesus, I understood that God had never seen me the way people did. He looked at my heart, and he knew that my decisions came from a genuine desire to build a life based on love and honor. If you're carrying doubt or living in fear because of what someone has told you about your relationship with God, I want to encourage you to do something that took me a long time to have the courage to do. Ask him directly. Talk to him about your fears, your questions, your pain. The answer has always been there, waiting for you to seek it. God's love is bigger than our mistakes. His grace is stronger than our doubts. And his understanding goes deeper than any human rule or tradition. You are not condemned. You are not forgotten. You are not beyond hope. You are loved with a love that sees your heart and knows your story. And that love will never let you go.